Possessing the severed heads of women.
Ed Kemper, aka the Co-Ed Killer. As always, I'm going to start this video out with a quick rundown of Kemper's childhood. Born in Burbank, California, Kemper was the middle child and only son to Edmund Emil Kemper II and Clarnell Elizabeth Kemper. Kemper was considered a very bright child. Although he suffered antisocial disorder, he kept to himself. One of his favorite games to play with his sister was called Gas Chamber. He would stand in his room while his sister would open the door and throw pretend pellets, and he would act like he was being gassed to death. Some of the more disturbing things Kemper also used to do was he would beat and kill animals. He stated one time that he actually dug a hole and buried a cat alive. After he presumed it was dead, he came back, unburied it, and then decapitated it and mounted the head on a stick. One of the last things I want to cover about Kemper's childhood is the fact that he was very large for his age. He had trouble in school with all the kids picking on him and calling him names. One of the people that picked on Ed for his size was his own mother. She used to belittle him and would actually make him sleep in the basement away from everybody else. And in 1957, he was devastated when his family split up and he had to stay with his mother in Montana. At the age of 13, Kemper couldn't take any more of the verbal and physical abuse from his mother and ran away to Los Angeles to be with his father. Kemper's happiness was short-lived when he found out that his father had remarried and had another son. He didn't like the fact that he had to share his father's attention with his half-brother and began to act out. And after only living there for a month, his father sent him back to Montana. Once Kemper got back home with his mother, he killed another family cat. He hid it in his closet, and after his mother found it, she freaked out and sent him to live with his grandparents. This is where he would commit his first murders. Once Kemper got back home with his mother, he killed another family cat. He hid it in his closet, and after his mother found it, she freaked out and sent him to live with his grandparents. This is where he would commit his first murders. On August 27, 1964, Kemper would go on to kill his grandmother. He said that they had had an argument, which enraged him. She was sitting at her kitchen table when Kemper walked in with a .22 caliber rifle and would shoot her twice in the back and then once in the head. This didn't satisfy him, so he would get a knife and then stab her multiple times after she was already dead. He went on to drag her body into the bedroom. While he was in the bedroom, he heard his grandfather pulling up the driveway, so he walked outside and shot him in the face with the same rifle. Not sure what to do, Kemper would call his mom. His mother then told him that he should just call the police. So Kemper would call the police, and then he was sitting there waiting for them when they arrived. After he was questioned, he told them he just wanted to see what it would feel like to kill his grandmother, and that he killed his grandfather so that he wouldn't have to see what he had done. After being arrested for the murder of his grandparents, Kemper was interviewed by a Dr. Lundy. He would go on to say that Kemper was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and was being psychotic before sentencing him to the criminally insane unit of the Atascadero State Hospital. After a few months of being at the state hospital, Kemper was given an IQ test to where he scored 145. He was then re-diagnosed with a personality trait of passive-aggressive. He would then go on to impress all the doctors. He impressed them so much that they would go on to train him to be able to give psychiatric tests to the new inmates. Since the murders took place when Kemper was a minor, he was released at the age of 21. After Kemper was released, his record from being a minor was expunged, so he went on to try to be a state trooper, but he thinks that his size prevented him from being a cop. So he used to drink at a bar called the Jury Room, where he became friendly with a bunch of local cops. This will play into the story later. On May 7, 1972, Kemper commits his first murders. The victims are Mary Ann Pesky and Anita Marie Lucchesa. They were hitchhiking to Stanford University. Now, after they got in Kemper's car, he drove them to a secluded, wooded area. He put Lucchesa in the trunk and handcuffed Pesky. Now, a weird thing that Kemper says he did was, when he was getting back in the car, he brushed against one of Pesky's breasts, and he said this really embarrassed him. Even though he planned on killing her, he apologized for doing so, and then he would go on to stab and strangle her to death. After he'd finished Pesky off, he got Lucchesa out of the trunk and did the same thing to her. Now, once both victims were dead, he put them both back in the trunk and went on to go home. On his way home, he was pulled over by the police for having a broken taillight. They let him off with a warning. Now, once he got home, he dismembered both women, severed their heads, and says he committed fellatio on the severed heads and raped both the bodies. He ended up ditching them into a wooded area. They found Pesky's head in the Prieta Mountains. The rest of the body parts were never found. Kemper's third victim would be on September 14th, 1972. It was 15-year-old Aiko Koo. She was hitchhiking after missing her bus to dance class. Now, just like Kemper's first two victims, after getting her in the car, he drove off to a wooded, secluded area. But this time, he had pulled a .22 caliber gun. When he got out of the car to go to the passenger side, he had somehow locked himself out of the car. Now, for whatever reason, he managed to talk Koo into letting him back in the car. This is when he would shoot and kill her. He would throw her body into the trunk of his car and then stop at a bar where cops drank all the time called the Jury Room. After having a few drinks, he took the body home, severed her head, had fellatio with the severed head, and raped the corpse. On January 7th, 1973, Kemper would kill his fourth victim. The victim was Cindy Shaw. At this time, Kemper was actually living at his mother's house. So after he did his normal drive him to a secluded area and kill him, he took the body back home and hid her in the closet till the following morning after his mother left for work. After she was gone, he took the body into the bathtub, severed her head, and did exactly what he did with the first few victims. I'm getting tired of actually saying fellatio, but he did the same exact thing as he did to the first three. This time, though, he ditched the body, but kept her head for several days, continuing to rape the head. After the police found Shaw's body, they went on to let people know that there may be a serial killer on the loose, and informed all co-eds not to hitchhike or to get into strangers' cars. Kemper's fifth and sixth victims would come on February 5th, 1973. He had an argument earlier that day with his mother and fled the house. He was driving on the UCSC campus when he seen Rosalind Thorpe and Allison Liu hitchhiking. He pulled up to him. Thorpe got in the car without even second guessing it, but Allison Liu was a little weary of Kemper. Thorpe eventually talked her into getting into the car. He drove him off to a secluded area of the campus and shot and killed both of them. Now, when he was leaving the campus, he came across a security guard. The guard let him through the gate only because he had UCSC stickers on his car. He did his normal deed before ditching the bodies at Eden Canyon. Kemper's final victims would be his own mother, Clarnell Strandberg, and her best friend, Sally Hallett. This happened on April 20th, 1973. Kemper had waited for his mother to come home from a party. They got into a small argument and she went off to bed. He went and got a claw hammer, went in while she was sleeping, and then beat her to death with it. After he was done beating her, he severed her head, committed fellatio on his own damn mother's severed head, and then raped her body. But he didn't stop there. After he was done doing this nasty deed, he cut out her vocal cords and her tongue. He said that it only seemed appropriate for all the years of bitching she had done. He ended up grinding up the tongue and the vocal cords in a garbage disposal. After he had finished this, he went to a bar, had a couple drinks, got a buzz, and then called Sally Hallett and invited her over for dinner. When she arrived, he strangled her to death and then hung her up in his closet. He tied a note to her reading, "No need to suffer anymore at the hands of this murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I always wanted it, not sloppy and incomplete. Gents, just a lack of time. I got things to do." After leaving the note, he stole Hallett's car and drove to Pueblo, Colorado. After he arrived there, he expected to see the story on the news. When he didn't, he decided to call and turn himself in. But as I stated earlier, he was friends with cops that he drank with at the jury room, so they laughed it off and said, "All right, Ed, call back later." So he did. He called back later. This time, the cops kept him on the phone and sent another officer to his mother's house. When they found the gruesome discovery, they told him to wait there. Cops came and arrested him. The one cop said he was so tall that he actually had his hands on top of the telephone booth when they asked him to put his hands in the air. On November 8, 1973, Kemper was found guilty of 8 counts of first-degree murder. After the verdict was read back, he asked if he can be put to death by torture. Of course, the judge didn't grant this and sent him off to California Medical Facility, where he was put on the same ward as Charles Manson and Herbert Mullen. He was later put in charge of scheduling other inmates' psychiatric appointments, along with reading books to the blind inmates. He ends one interview saying he wishes he was in charge of actually giving the psychiatric examinations.
Just be somewhere. It's scary going out there trying to bury somebody or dispose of body parts.